Welcome to our workshop today. Quick introduction. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Mission. So a little bit of detail about me. I am a technologist and a programmer. So I'm very technical, love to write code. You can definitely try to quiz us and stump us with your Q&A. I love that. I'm also a bourbon junkie, so big fan of all of the whiskeys of the world, but bourbon is my personal favorite. And I have a lot of experience with cloud infrastructure as a cloud operator and a builder and a user. Done a lot of startups and built out kind of successful businesses on top of the cloud. So who is Mission exactly? So we are an AWS Premier Consulting Partner and Managed Service Provider. And Premier Consulting Partner, that is the top tier that you can be in terms of a partner with AWS. It's a big effort to get that certification, so we're excited to be one of their premier partners. And we're also certified managed service provider with them. And we have the migration competency, which is obviously relevant to today's conversation. So what do we do? As a partner to AWS, we offer kind of a comprehensive set of services that kind of span the entire cloud journey, right? So from the architect phase, when you're trying to figure out, am I ready for a migration to the cloud? What's my technology roadmap? What kind of POCs do I need to perform, or any best practices? Through the actual migrations themselves. So we do many migrations, helped a lot of customers be successful getting from where they are into AWS. We do guided cloud transformation as well. So above just lift and shifting you into AWS, we can actually help transform your workloads and your business to take full advantage of the power of AWS. We do things like CI/CD implementation, configuration management, infrastructure as code. And then once you're in the cloud, we help customers by managing their environments. So we can do AWS account management, 24/7 kind of monitoring, incident response, and support. AWS has a huge suite of AI/ML services, and we have capabilities there. And we have continuous consultation from a DevOps perspective. So we can actually sprint alongside your team, your DevOps team, and help you be successful in the cloud. And finally, a big topic of conversation for anyone on AWS is to make sure that you're optimized. And that is a big focus of ours as well. So we help customers continuously evaluating their environments, helping them from a cost perspective to identify where their money is going, how can we optimize and reduce your bill, how can we make sure that your dollars are being spent in the most effective and appropriate way. And we also have access to kind of negotiate really great pricing from AWS if you have especially willing to commit type workloads. So happy to be here today, and I am joined by several other great panelists. Now, in terms of what the agenda for the day is, startups building on AWS and kind of what that looks like in the world today, and kind of best practices and why someone would pick AWS to build out their startup. And then Scott is actually going to walk through the migration process that Mission uses. So, migration is very much a journey. As we talk about, the cloud itself is very much a journey, and there's many phases to that. And there's a lot of work that has been put in by Mission and by AWS to develop a strong methodology for helping identify, that path to the cloud. It's a much more detailed methodology than just purely we're ready to go, let's make it happen, and kind of flip a switch. So Scott's going to actually walk us through that in detail. And then finally, we have a success story about a migration that Mission helped with. I had the pleasure of speaking with this customer in a couple of weeks ago, and so we've recorded that, and we'll play that for the group, and you can hear a little bit about this successful migration that the customer had, how they walked through that process with Mission, so you can kind of see it exactly as Scott is outlining, what that actually looked like in practice. And then, of course, we'll have time for Q&A as well. Mackenzie, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
My name is Mackenzie Kosut. I'm the global startup advocate here at Amazon. And a lot of people ask, well, what does that mean? It means I go around meeting with hundreds of startups every year to provide mentorship and guidance. And this is both on technical advisement on how to architect systems. But I'll get into the part about startups. For the last 14 years, startups have overwhelmingly preferred to build on top of Amazon. And they do this for a number of reasons. But if you look at the verticals and spaces we're in, it covers every possible sector, from healthcare, life sciences, to fintech. I mean, these are companies like 23andMe who are using AWS to create over 150 different reports based on your genetics data. People like Convoy, who are completely disrupting the $800 billion trucking industry, and is really a key player now during post-COVID world, trying to get goods from point A to point B. Companies that just every imaginable industry in some ways using AWS in a meaningful way. But startups choose AWS for a number of reasons. And the first is that we really understand startups. I share some of my background, but I'm just one of many of the startup experts here at Amazon. In fact, one of our startup business development teams, this entire team is comprised of former venture capitalists, startup executives, and startup founders. And the whole role of myself and others on this team is to learn about your company and find ways that we can introduce you to partnerships within Amazon, introduce you to other startups, and even make connections into the larger world of enterprises where you can sell your offerings there. Second is that we have a number of proven programs for startups. So perhaps you're building a physical product, you want to sell to the millions of customers on Amazon.com. Launchpad is a program we have that'll get your product front page placement on Amazon. We have Amazon Business, which helps with procurement offerings and getting your business up and going from the office side of it, along with a number of credits programs, so I'll touch on very briefly. But of course, the cornerstone of why startups have been using Amazon and continue to use Amazon today is really because we have and still have the deepest and broadest technical platform out there. And so the way to think about this is these are all of the essential building blocks to really take some of the biggest ideas and build them quickly and easily. So perhaps you want to be ingesting and processing tremendous amounts of real-time data. You can do that using Kinesis. Maybe you're in the space of machine learning and you have machine learning experts who want an end-to-end machine learning environment to build, train, and deploy these models at scale. Well, SageMaker is a tool that lets you do this. Or maybe you're an agricultural startup and you want to be leveraging IoT devices and doing that in a secure and encrypted way and managing all these devices in the field. Well, our IoT offering helps in that space. So these are just 3 of the 190 services that, again, let you take an idea, piece these little building blocks together, and start tackling some really large problems. What was kind of a big surprise to us is how AWS impacted really the startup ecosystem over the last 14 years. So some of the data we've looked at, back in 2005, typical amount of money it would cost to get a startup off the ground was about $500,000. And that's a lot of money when you consider that a lot of that's just going towards infrastructure and teams to manage it. Well, with when AWS came out, it allowed people to basically leverage tools like RDS, EC2 and S3, and this reduced the cost to about $50,000 to get an idea off the ground. Today, we're seeing companies launch for less than $5,000, and these are 1 or 2 person startups who have 30 or 40,000 paying customers. So this evolution has just been really extraordinary and incredible to see. But this also changed the way that venture capitalists really look at startups and their strategy around investing in them. So Harvard Business School did a study that looked at the first 10 years of the impact of AWS, specifically Amazon, to startups. And what they found was because VCs no longer had to make one big $500,000 bet, they're able to then spread their risk across 10 smaller $50,000 bets. What you ended up seeing was a big increase in the number of early stage startups basically coming about. And this has continued to evolve since then. And so it's incredible to see this because you have people with an idea and a tiny bit of cash being able to get that company going and perhaps even bootstrap it for a long amount of time. This just was not possible before AWS was around. Another key value to Amazon is just really how our services help drive a lot of innovation within your company. So of course, there's 0 upfront cost. We're not paying for these long-term contracts, but because you can turn on or off these services as you need them, this means that now your teams are able to launch faster. If you have a new idea, in a matter of a couple days, you can spin up a prototype of that idea and get it out to somebody. I just talked to a company a couple weeks ago in Missouri, and they were focused on the educational space. And about 2 months ago, when COVID started to get bigger, they were able to pivot and create a contact tracing app within 3 days They use Amazon Connect to build a whole call system that lets you call in, basically provide information about the contact tracing details, and triage your situation, along with a mobile app. The idea that a company is able to pivot within 3 days to a whole entirely different new market, again, is just kind of the value of being able to build on top of AWS. What this means is it ends up driving down your cost of experimentation, right? The quicker it is to take an idea, build a prototype, and put it in the hands of your customers, it means the more of these ideas you can be testing, the more experiments you can be running. And then when one finally takes off, you can double down on that idea and spin off the resources, the ones that aren't quite making the cut. So ultimately, all this means is that it allows you to focus on really what matters, and that's building product. You shouldn't be spending your time managing infrastructure, securing systems, patching them, worrying about backups and updates. You should be focusing on building new, engaging services and offerings really for your customers. Another interesting trend that we see is in the very early days, in the humble beginnings of any company, your technical needs are really pretty simple. People need a website, a domain name, and an email address. But your needs as a startup are going to grow, and they're going to change as you evolve, as you tap into new markets, as you have new revenue streams, as your user base grows. Your needs for infrastructure are going to rapidly start increasing and changing. And so these are just some samples or examples of the way that things you have to be thinking about when your infrastructure starts growing. So in the early days, people will just pick any offering that has a static website, any kind of hosting service, and they think this will get me through the first hurdle. And it does. But when their company starts to have more complicated use cases, or security becomes important because they're processing potentially financial data, or resiliency and scalability become important because you start to have more users are depending on this brand and image and company that you're building, a lot of these reasons we see people reaching out. They start to reach out to people like Mission and to Amazon, and they say, hey, we need a more scalable, resilient infrastructure that we should be building on. We want to be doing more with the data analytics space to understand what our users are doing and to figure out what new features we should be building. And so your early choice of where you build is okay, but once you start to reach those pain points, that's where using AWS will really help unlock a lot more potential within your company. A lot of people ask the question, well, as I'm building, how do I know I'm doing the right thing? And one thing that Mission's very good at, and one thing that you should be aware of, is a well-architected framework. And these are the essential questions you can be asking yourself to make sure you're building proper infrastructure and architecture. And they're built around the 5 pillars of performance, operational resiliency, reliability, security, and most importantly, cost optimization, which should be a key factor when you're building your company and trying to keep your burn rate low. One of the extra benefits of having a really well-architected system, and a lot of people don't think about this, is as you start growing more within your company, you're going to be hiring more developers and more engineers who have to come in and start to make sense of what it is that you've built. And oftentimes in pre-AWS companies, I've gone in and you spend the first few months trying to decipher the weird ways that people have built these systems and hand-jammed weird solutions. But if you've built your company, or you've done your migration using a well-architected framework, it means that one of the many people who are familiar with AWS that you hire, who come in and join your team as a developer, can quickly get up and running and deploying in a matter of minutes rather than spending weeks trying to read diagrams and learn all this custom tooling. So there's a real value-added benefit by using well-architected framework and getting the guidance by someone like Mission to make sure you're building in the way that people expect when they start looking at your setup. Of course, beyond the startup space, we have a large number of enterprise customers also using Amazon, millions of them. And startups say, well, I'm now using AWS. How can I tap into selling perhaps my B2B or SaaS offering to these enterprises? And that was a big ask we've had. And so for the last couple of years, we actually have a program called AWS Connections. And what this does is it's a double opt-in program. And we talk to enterprises across hospitality, travel, healthcare, gaming, you name it. And we find out what problems they're facing and they're trying to solve, where a startup might be offering a solution in that space. We then go through our huge Rolodex of startups who are running on Amazon. We find a mutual overlap of interest and problem solving. And then once both sides say, yes, there's a purpose here, we facilitate the introduction and have a whole meeting to kind of work out that partnership. And so last year alone, we had over 1,000 meetings. This isn't a one-to-many, this isn't 5 startups sitting down in front of an enterprise. This is 1 startup and 1 enterprise sitting down and trying to find out ways that they can help each other. And so this is just one example of the many programs you get access to once you're building on top of AWS. Of course, in the world of startups, you're building fast, right? It's all about how quickly can you get out the door. But at the same time, you should be building smart. And I'm going to touch back on the idea of cost optimization, because I think that's an area where I see startups really struggling. We are one of the only providers, we are actually the only provider who have a trusted advisor dashboard. And this is a tool that you have access to, which will tell you where you're overspending and where you can save money. You know, one thing that we don't like to see and Mission doesn't like to see is your spend of infrastructure outpacing the growth of your users. And so Trusted Advisor is a way to go back and look at ways that you can right-size instances, make changes to improve performance, find ways to enhance your availability by having proper failover or active-active situations, improvements to security, and more. But the interesting pattern is that startups know that they can depend on this. And so what we end up seeing is, this is a hypothetical chart to kind of demonstrate the point. Startups start building in January and they start using these services, they're spinning stuff up, they might forget to turn something down. They over provision stuff from the start because you don't know how many users you might be getting. And they forget that, forget to go back and downsize that instance later on. And so 9 months go by and they say, wait, my Amazon bill's higher than it should be. So they look at this tool and they start doing optimization, and then they go back to what they were doing at that point. We often, from the AWS side, talk to startups and we say, look at Trusted Advisor. And they go, I know what I need to do to reduce my costs. I just don't have the time to be doing that right now. And a good way to think about partners like Mission is, Mission's a great way to buy that time, to have someone come in and spend the time finding ways to help you optimize this infrastructure. If you talk to somebody and say, hey, have you gone through any kind of optimization on your own for cost savings? People will say it's too low of a priority for me right now, even though it could be a tremendous amount of savings. If you partner with someone like Mission early on, they're going to make sure that your infrastructure is scaling proportionally to your user growth. And so that's a great amount of realized savings where you're not overspending and trying to reduce costs, spending, reducing costs. And so a good way to recap is partners really help make sure that you're squeezing every cent of optimization out of your infrastructure. Of course, with startups, you're building fast because you're trying to get quickly to market. You know, getting early to market is okay. Getting there late can be disastrous. You'll be playing catch up against your competitors or other people in the space. Startups are always strapped for time, strapped for resources. And another great way to think about partners is, this is a way to shortcut it. To say, look, I'm going to build my mobile app. I'm going to get my website, work on my design, work on my marketing piece. I'm going to let Mission help sort out how that's going to scale, how they're going to do it for a cheap cost, how it's going to be performant and reliable when the users start to come in and grow rapidly. And so a second way to really think about partners is really buying a shortcut on time and helping you get to market much quicker. So there are a lot of benefits to working with Amazon. Some of them to touch on is largest global footprint. We have over 24 regions around the world. Each region is comprised of 1 or more availability center. These are individual data centers that have their own data lines, their own power grids, and each one can take the traffic and capacity from the other failed AZs if that happens. So we really put a lot of effort into making sure that you're able to build on top of really reliable and efficient infrastructure. Security, we have a large number of compliance offerings. If you are building in HIPAA space or PCI space or FedRAMP, if you go to our security page, you can learn all about all the different accreditations we have to help run even the most secure, security-focused or minded workloads. The third is analytics. You know, it used to be that companies were competing on tech. The company that had the greatest tech had the best advantage. But with the cloud, and specifically AWS, really all this tech has been democratized. And what this means is you, as a 1 or 2 person startup or 10 or 20 person startup, have access to the exact same technology as the largest Fortune 500 companies. I was meeting with an insurance startup called Roots out of Ohio a year and a half, 2 years ago. They're small at the time, they're big now. But you go down this back alley and there's a small office there and you just see them working. And they're there in the shadows of skyscrapers of some of the largest insurance companies surrounding them. And it was incredible to see what they were able to build because, again, they're using that same tech at their fingertips and your fingertips. They're building with what the largest companies in the world are using. So this has just leveled the playing field on the competitive side. So today, where companies are competing is on analytics. You know, it's all of your apps and your mobile apps, your services are all generating interesting data. And so it's a matter of what are you doing with that to understand more about user behaviors. And so we have a large number of services using ML that help you derive really interesting insights to help build better products and engage their customers. Lastly, innovation, that goes back to the slide I talked to about before, but we see a big increase in innovation for companies of all sizes who end up switching to leveraging these 190 services from AWS. People ask, well, what are the drivers for migration to the cloud? You know, why are people actually moving? And one of the first reasons is agility. Giving your teams access to these tools just gives them the ability to pivot, to test new ideas. They're not dependent on other teams or multiple providers to get a server spun up, and it doesn't take hours. You know, in a matter of minutes, you have access to all of these services. It says data center consolidation. If you're doing data centers in your startup, let's have an offline conversation. I hope by 2020, we've all moved away from that. Another big need is, again, security. I touched on that. Digital transformation is interesting, right? There's a lot of companies who deal with paperwork and they're trying to find ways to digitize these business processes. Maybe it's phone calls that are inbound. Maybe it's thousands of submitted documents or claim forms or just handwritten pieces of paper. And so we have tools like Amazon Comprehend that can go and analyze these documents and pull out trends and people and topics and dates and start to give you insights across vast amounts of documents. So that's one example of many services we have that allow you to take one of our services and a simple API call, start pulling out really valuable information from this data that's locked in analog or hard to reach information. Of course, IoT and AI ML are another big driver. And we're touching again on cost because that's a big area where we like to see ways that we can be helping startups. So historically, we've done thousands of migrations. Mission's gone through a large number of migrations. I'm sure they have data that looks very similar to this. But the numbers that we've looked at, companies of all sizes that have gone through migrations to AWS, they've seen a 51% lower cost of operations. We have smaller amount of teams needed to actually run this stuff. We see 95% less unplanned downtime because, again, they're basically they're shifting all of the undifferentiated heavy lifting over to us, and we've gotten really good at running high scale, high traffic, high volume websites and applications. So let us run that infrastructure for you, and so you can focus again on building that app. Because your developers have access to all these tools, we see a 62% productivity boost. People are able to have an idea in a matter of days, be able to build out a prototype and get into the hands of their customers and start getting feedback on these products. And we also see a big improvement on just deployment times, seeing people pushing out new features, 3 times as many on average for customers and companies who have migrated. A program I do want to touch on before wrapping this up is AWS Activate. And this is a long-standing program for all of our startups. All the startups you saw on that slide in the beginning have all gone through Activate. And so if you're pre-funded, you have access to $1,000 in Amazon credits, which if you partner with Mission, you can find more optimal ways to be using those credits. And we also have an offering of Activate if you have received funding from a venture capitalist or through an accelerator or incubator, you have access to potentially up to $100,000 in credits, business support, self-paced labs and credits to really learn the ins and outs of our services and many more benefits. So definitely look up Activate and be familiar with it. But definitely before you start building and using those credits, talk to Mission and find out how you can best apply those so you're using them in a very efficient manner. So again, for the reasons I'm talking about today and many more, that's why you see all companies like this building on Amazon today. We're excited to have you migrate over and start partnering with you to see what you and Mission end up building. So to summarize the benefits of working with Mission, partners like Mission allow you to, again, build quickly. You can get this, you can basically work on building your app itself or basically offload the burden of setting up that architecture so it's well architected, and Mission will take care of that for you. Second is they're going to help you make sure that's cost optimized where you're not overspending, and they have many ways to offset the cost of working with Mission, so it ends up saving you money. And then third is they're going to ensure that you're building well architected. So all those new developers and engineers you're onboarding will see something familiar, and they'll understand how these components are pieced together so they can start working on deploying new features and not diving through this documentation wikis to understand how these systems work. So for takeaways and next steps, you could first do nothing at all, in which case, thank you for listening to the spiel for 25 minutes. Second is you could launch a free account and start playing with our services. But third, which I really recommend, is to reach out to Mission and talk to them for an hour, show them what you're working on, get feedback from them on ways to think about how your architecture should look, and potentially partner with them in the future. Again, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Very, very good information in there, and appreciate the strong recommendation for Mission. Thank you for being such a great partner. So this is Scott Goldberg. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Goldberg. I'm a senior solutions architect here at Mission. A little bit about me, like it says, I'm a cloud architect. So I've been working with AWS and the cloud in general for probably over 10 years now. Love to design new workloads in the cloud, especially for and around customer migrations. I love writing automation, and that sort of bleeds into my personal hobbies of smart home automation. So I've got devices all around the house, and the lights turn on and off at all the random times of the day, and you name it, I've got it. So happy to be here. Thanks.
All right. Scott, walk us through.
All right. So basically, I'm going to give you guys an overview of the process. We're going to dive into a particular use case and then kind of talk about next steps and how we can engage. So basically, Mission handles migrations in a number of different ways depending on each customer's requirements, right? But our preferred migration strategy is a combination of AWS frameworks and programs so that we can provide a structured migration approach while maintaining flexibility for your business. So we start every engagement with an SA on demand call. And this is where we can review your particular use case, do some initial discovery, and answer any questions you might have about the process in general. It helps us identify the appropriate resources on our end and any AWS funding programs that might be a good fit for you. The follow-up phase, if necessary, is that we'll have a consultative workshop that utilizes various AWS frameworks to help you better understand your current cloud readiness state, architect a solution, and identify any gaps to getting there. In conjunction with the technical discovery process, we'll typically get started with financial planning and total cost of ownership, where we can get you analysis of what it'll cost to run your existing workloads in the cloud, but while also identifying areas for cost reduction. From there, we move on to the actual migrate phase, and this is going to be the primary work phase or phases where we'll build out the AWS infrastructure, execute on any proofs of concept you might want, and migrate your applications to the cloud. And the final phase, and it's sort of optional, is the optimize phase. And so that's going to consist of ongoing environmental support for incremental improvements and continued cost optimization. So I'm going to talk through the migration process for a customer, Example Inc. I know it's so clever, right? And so basically, Example Inc. is a contract lifecycle management company, and they provide software solutions for over 2,000 different healthcare entities and hospitals. They came to us looking for to consolidate their infrastructure inside of AWS from multiple different colo locations and even inside their actual office location in order to reduce their operational and support burdens. So migrating to AWS will allow for them to take advantage of several modernization initiatives like operating system upgrades, AWS managed services, and cost reductions while also increasing availability and redundancy. At a high level overview of their tech stack, it consists of a monolithic application and web server, clustered database and file servers, and a number of additional static servers that perform various tasks like cron jobs, application deployments, and other automation tasks. So they're deployed across a number of different locations, like I mentioned before, but with several hot spare or warm standby environments for disaster recovery purposes. There's a complex web of firewalls, VPNs, and routes that we had to comb through with them as well. Our technical deep dive session is rooted in multiple AWS methodologies like the cloud adoption and well-architected frameworks to make it easier for customers to work through migration planning without getting inundated with spreadsheets and processes. We really want to make the migration process work best for you and your company and the way that you like to work. And so the cloud adoption framework is an output from AWS's Migration Acceleration Program, or MAP, which started with an enterprise focus, but has since kind of started to move downstream. But there are a number of pieces in the framework that are worth investigating, even with smaller startups, because in addition to the technical architectural requirements, there are a number of business and operational related dependencies that it's good to flesh out pre-migration. Some of the things that you should be thinking about are, what are your internal skill sets for prepping for the migration, managing the migration, and then operating in the cloud afterwards? How much financial planning have you done? What are the licensing implications? How might this migration change the way that you want to charge your customers or even budget internally? What about disaster recovery, business continuity, security, patching, backups, right? All of those different operational management processes. And then what improvements or optimizations do you want to achieve during or post migration? And what are some of the main concerns or risks to having a successful migration? These are all questions that we can work through together, and it's certainly not an exhaustive list of things to think through. So Example Inc. came to Mission with a number of must-have requirements as part of their business case for a cloud migration. They wanted a highly available environment with the ability to scale tiers individually. They identified that their currently deployed application would scale up based on demand from the app tier, but this came with the added overhead of scaling the web tier equally. They also wanted a simplified network architecture that would allow them to span multiple accounts and regions and grow in the future, but without adding any additional management overhead. They wanted the ability to consolidate and store large amounts of NFS data that could be easily accessed by multiple different applications and servers. They also wanted and had a business continuity plan that includes failover to another warm AWS region. And any potential reductions in cost we could get them would be an added win. So using the 6 R's migration strategy, I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but we work with the customer to identify the proposed migration path for each VM. We end up with an inventory list that identified whether a VM would be rehosted, replatformed, repurchased, refactored, retired, or retained. Those are the 6 R's. And we use this to inform the migration plan moving forward. A number of machines were identified as needing OS and MySQL version upgrades. So we plan to take care of that by launching servers in AWS using the most recent machine images and working with the customer to configure them. For any machines that couldn't be rebuilt because the customer either didn't know how or were using outdated software, we plan to just migrate them using the lift and shift methodology and the Cloud Endure tool, which is a block level replication tool that AWS owns. We implemented AWS managed services for the database and file storage tiers. And this allowed for simplified operational support moving forward, along with a number of improvements to elasticity and DR. We also separated the app and web tiers and implemented auto scaling and load balancing for each of them. This way, they could scale on demand independently from one another, while also allowing us to reduce the number of provisioned instances, which reduced their spend. And finally, we designed a disaster recovery environment in a secondary region that could also double as a UAT and demo environment when not needed. So they were able to give customers access to this region that would otherwise be sitting idle, and then have a process for cutting over to it if and when needing to do so. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's the kind of third phase is TCO analysis or financial planning. And we kind of do this in tandem with phase two, right? So it's discovery of your environment, but that also includes making sure that we can get you as accurate a cost representation as possible. And we use a tool called CloudChomp for doing that. And so CloudChomp's a TCO analysis and migration tool that we use for almost every migration effort and implement during that discovery phase. It has a VMware OVA file, which is really convenient and can be installed to ingest historical data from your vSphere environment. There's also an SNMP collection method for other virtualized or bare metal servers that can collect additional information like installed applications and various dependencies. When using VMware, the tool can generate a right-sized cost estimate based on the utilization data in as little as 1 day. So we can get started really quickly. And using the SNMP agent can take a little bit longer as CloudChomp can only aggregate the usage moving forward. So the SNMP agent we like to let run as long as you think it needs to in order to collect an accurate representation of the utilization of your environment. And so the CloudChomp platform offers a number of different recommendation engines depending on your needs and even allows you to craft a migration plan from it. And the best part is that there's no more emailing spreadsheets back and forth, and CloudChomp provides us with a single place to collaborate together on your server inventory and even allows you to collaborate better internally across teams with various access levels. So this is a quick screenshot from the CloudChomp tool, and this is a look at the inventory page. It gives us information about the OS, provision resources like CPU, memory, and disk, and also details things like average and max usage metrics, which then allows the tool to make intelligent sizing recommendations for your instances. As I said before, the best part is our ability to be able to collaborate on the last two columns you can see here. We can determine what the migration pattern will be for each VM and add any notes for things we don't want to forget. And at the top, in the light blue boxes, you can see that we're filtering by migration pattern equals not retire and not retain. And this way, we're only looking at the machines that need to physically move to AWS. And this generally ends up being the starting point for a migration plan. So it's a really powerful tool that lets us do a lot of collaboration, add notes, make changes, add things that maybe the tool didn't know about or pick up, or even destination state changes that you want to see happen. So in the analytics section of the platform, we're looking at multiple cost estimates for the same filtered servers in the last inventory slide. So based on actual cost values from your data center, CloudChomp can calculate your current cost of ownership. And that's that $2,000 column there. And so the next three columns are varying estimates for your migration to AWS. And so the first one, the like for like, is really showing you and keeping all of the provisioned resources the same. So this will always be the most expensive option and can sometimes even be more expensive than what you might be paying for today. That's why it's really important to take the time to size your environment appropriately so you're not paying for underutilized resources. The next column, CC Optimize, shows this right-sized estimate that I was kind of referring to based on the actual resource utilization data collected by the platform. So you also have the opportunity to size based on max or average CPU or memory values, and you can override anything you might not agree with. Again, the tool can only do so much, and kind of combining it with your business knowledge will really give us the best, most accurate output. And the final column shows the same configuration as the previous one, but includes the purchase of reserved instances, which essentially give you a discount for a commitment to AWS. And we generally find that customers will fall somewhere in between the last two columns. But again, it's all going to be specific to your use case and your data, and that's what makes the tool so powerful. So moving on to the migrate phase, we'll validate the preliminary architecture design and work to automate most deployments using infrastructure as code. And with that, we're going to do things like deploy a number of security and management tools, work out the backup patch management, monitoring tools and processes, build out any migration tooling and automations, migrate your workloads depending on those previously identified migration methodologies. And finally, you can even work to train your team on operating in the cloud and DevOps best practices depending on your readiness. You can see on the right here is an architectural diagram for this customer. It touches on all the requirements that Example Inc. had for independently scaled web, app, and database tiers, along with the EFS file storage and a simplified network design. So the last phase is optimize. I mentioned earlier it's somewhat optional, but it's in your best case to do so. And so your cloud journey is really just starting, and there's a continual need for ongoing cloud optimization. Your AWS environment needs to be monitored to identify when assets are being underutilized or not even utilized at all. And when opportunities exist to reduce costs by deleting, terminating, or releasing zombie assets. It's also important to stay on top of reserved instance or savings plans to ensure that you have appropriate coverage. And even implementing automated ways to save, like auto-scaling groups and intelligent storage tiering, and even automated lights out where you're turning environments off when they're not in use. The cloud isn't so much a set it and forget it kind of thing. There's always new features to investigate and different ways to reduce your cost. And if this is area you think you're going to need assistance with, we can always help you with one of our managed services as well. And thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Jonathan.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Scott. That was perfect. And you know, if you don't mind, actually, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions based upon what you said, because I know it can spark some questions from the audience as well. So for those of you in the audience, you can definitely use the Q&A feature in Zoom to ask questions as well. But a couple of common things that I hear. You mentioned the well-architected framework and the cloud adoption framework. Can you maybe tell me a little bit more about what those are?
So the well-architected framework, these are both things that are sort of designed by AWS and put out there in the public domain for all of us to use. And so the well-architected framework is really just the different set of best practices around operating in the cloud and the AWS platform in general. And so these are things like, you know, are you encrypting traffic? Do you have high availability for your resources? Is there a DR plan in place? Those types of things. And the cloud adoption framework is sort of more specific to their migration acceleration program. And so this is a set of, I think it's about 90 different questions that get a little bit more in depth than just general cloud best practices and are more geared towards your actual migration readiness. So, you know, do you have you put a thought into what you want your landing zone architecture to look like before moving in? Have you put a thought into, you know, the different facets of patching and backups and monitoring and how those are different than what you're doing today? And really just giving you the sense of the well-roundedness around making sure that you can have all of your bases covered before kind of taking those first steps to migrate to the cloud.
Yeah, and to me, the most interesting thing about both the well-architected framework and the cloud adoption framework is that AWS developed them with customers, right? And they did it based upon their experience with those customers. And AWS has more customers and more experience than anybody else in the market when it comes to, you know, cloud adoption, right? This is they invented this technology. So it makes sense that they would have collected all these best practices together and these guidelines based upon that experience. So it's this kind of time-tested thing. So it's actually quite valuable. A lot of times when people hear about, you know, frameworks and, you know, collections of best practices, it's not backed by something like that. It's speculative. This is actually based upon experience. These weren't invented at the beginning of when they first released S3 and EC2. It was many years later after collecting all of these experiences over time, and they iterate them as well. So Mission, obviously, we're certified to deliver well-architected reviews by AWS. So in the past, only AWS could deliver them. You'd have to ask for them to be delivered. And now we have great folks like Scott who can actually deliver these well-architected reviews to customers. Okay.
That's not to say like it's one size fits all, right? And I think that's
Right.
where we come in as a partners to kind of help sift through the different facets of the frameworks and help you identify what's going to mean the most for your business, but while also driving the migration forward in whatever timeline that you might have.
Exactly. So one of the other things that you brought up was funding. You said something about or about funding programs with AWS, and this is something we should definitely share with the group as well. Is that there are programs available for you to kind of help accelerate your journey, and AWS is invested heavily in startups, especially. So maybe tell us a little bit more about that, Scott.
Yeah, so there's a number of different funding programs that we can work with AWS to potentially assist with your migration or other projects that you might have. And so the first we mentioned was the MAP, or Migration Acceleration Program, and that's really just geared towards helping you get to AWS, get to end state faster than you might on your own. And there's a number of other different funding programs like Startup Migrate, or even if you're just trying to run a proof of concept on AWS before making any commitments, there's different areas that we can help you out with that as well.
Perfect. All right, so we've covered funding. We talked a little bit about kind of the cloud adoption framework and the well-architected framework. Let's now talk about a success. Right? Let's see what it looks like in practice. As I mentioned earlier, we have a customer called Altiview, and I had the pleasure of sitting down with kind of the technical point of contact over there and talking about their migration to AWS and how Mission helped them. So I'm going to let my colleague Josh is actually going to share that video now.
So thank you so much. I think just to get started, maybe can you tell us a little bit about Altiview and kind of what you do?
Altiview is a biotech in Cambridge, Massachusetts, started in 2015. We were technology spun out of the Wyss Institute and Harvard University. And fundamentally, this technology allows scientists and researchers and pharmaceuticals to conduct digital pathology research to study what is going on in tissue samples, and this is used for drug discovery and pharmaceutical research, mostly cancer detection.
Wow. Well, fantastic. Well, what's your role at Altiview, so we can kind of how your involvement is?
Yes. So I am not an IT person. I've been around computers since 8th grade. But I'm mainly a scientist. That was my background enough. And my role at Altiview is I'm principal software engineer. And I was hired mainly to develop advanced algorithms for data mining, for image processing, and for infrastructure that would support our efforts. But in the early days, a small startup, I also was doing a lot of IT. And so I was led the team at Altiview to move all of our IT, all of our image processing in particular, to the cloud. And we'll be talking about that, but that was my role in the early days of this cloud work. Since then, we've hired an IT director, and she's managing our cloud very efficiently, but in the early days, that was my role. Primarily, I'm a software developer, but also doing this infrastructure work.
Well, that's my background too, writing code. So it's good that we have that.
What I like
common.
to do.
It's amazing how much you become an infrastructure and an IT person pretty quickly when you're writing code these days, right?
Yeah, right.
You kind of have to. So what were some of the challenges that you were facing that really prompted a move to the cloud, to AWS?
It's something of a big data problem. We have these images that are very large and lots of them. And we recognized, as I said, in the first year or two of operations that we were going to need to either spend a lot of money to build out a lot of infrastructure, and um, that looked a little bit daunting. And since we're a startup and we needed to get going quickly, the cloud obviously seemed like a good solution that we could have all that infrastructure up and running quickly and not have to build out a big server room or hire services. So there was an effort made right away. We recognized the need as I said, terabytes of data produced every day or every month. We needed to move to the cloud as soon as possible to handle this capacity of data storage.
In terms of the services that you're currently utilizing on AWS, maybe give me the highlights.
Sure. So we have EC2 primarily. We have several servers that I should say Mission helped us, and Jason Gay was the primary contact on that. He was excellent. They helped us design our virtual cloud and get all of our infrastructure set up. We have virtual private cloud that goes between our offices in Cambridge and to Amazon in East. We have two main servers. We actually have a kind of a split brain cloud because we have two fundamental groups. Our researchers group that is working to develop our technology, and then we have the services group that is exploiting it and taking in customer samples and staining and producing images and data analysis for our customers. And those, because it's the services group need to be secure and separate for privacy reasons, HIPAA and CLIA and so on in the future, we developed essentially two parallel clouds, two environments in our cloud. And they work independently, but they are actually hosted all in the same virtual private cloud. So we have two main servers that handle organizing the catalog of images in those two environments and other things. And those servers are running a Halo application. Then we have a cluster of analysis nodes. We also exploit extensively S3 to we use EC2 disks that are drives that are associated with the each cloud, and those are we originally actually, as I said, we're using SSD, but we've actually now in HDD drives. This performance slightly less, but a lot cheaper. So we have essentially a hierarchical data management problem, and I really do wish maybe some of the people listening here will be working on this. We really do need a solution that easily and transparently provides a way to bring files into a low latency environment for immediate analysis and then migrates them to cheaper and longer term storage, but makes it very convenient to bring them back for analysis in a high performance environment, all of it seamlessly. So we've actually had to try to build that ourselves. And with Mission's help, we've accomplished that. So we have hard disks that are storing the files, the images that are undergoing current analysis, those that are recently scanned in the last few days or weeks, and for our customers or for our own research. And then as the workflow is generally after a user has looked at an image and done the analysis, they don't really ever look at that again, except perhaps sometimes to go back and review and compare. So that slide is moved to S3, that image file is moved to S3 for cheaper, longer-term storage, and eventually to Glacier for even cheaper, longer-term storage. I worked with Mission to develop scripts that allow our users to bring back files in a convenient way using an identifying string for each file, a barcode that's on every slide. And they can conveniently bring images back. And then Mission helped us. This is, again, this hierarchical data management problem. Mission helped us set up a system which actually uses Cloudberry and some scripts that are running in PowerShell to every day at night, it copies all of the changed or new files from the EC2 HDD volumes to S3. as a backup, but also providing that long-term storage at a cheaper rate. And so we have a big data management problem. Of course, the EC2 volumes are expensive, so we're trying to keep those as small as possible and move older files to S3 over time, bringing them back if necessary. One other thing that I didn't mention, but we'd also exploit, is we can fire up compute servers for very high intensity computing, and we can choose an instance with 256 gigabytes of memory for some of our more memory intensive calculations. This allows us to do the parallel processing in that one server and process several slides at once, and batch process several slides. But it also means that we can just shut that down when we're done with it, and we're not paying for it over the weekend or for several days, perhaps when it's not being used. And as we can make it smaller one day if we find people aren't really needing that compute power whenever they start it up, just a few slides per day. But then, you know how it is. At the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, there's a bunch of stuff to get done. We can just, let's make another one of those. So then we have two compute servers, and we put one of our groups on one of them and the other group on the first one, and we now have twice the capacity, and when that's all over, we just shut it down. We don't have to pay for it and don't have to have an electric bill coming in the door. But of course, we have an Amazon bill.
Tell me a little bit, when you were looking for a partner, how did you identify Mission?
Well, we did want a local partner, and Mission was local to the area. We had pretty much decided at that point that we were going to go with Amazon. We got a list of providers in the area recommended, and Mission came highly recommended from Amazon. They gave us several others. They're not pushing anyone to any one consulting group. They're agnostic there. They gave us several providers, and we wrote up very detailed requirements, which are critical. And we distributed those and requests for proposals from these recommended providers for services. And Mission's proposal, we decided, our team decided it was the best of the proposals we'd received. It was well thought out and seemed to demonstrate that that Mission could easily handle the problem. We really had no doubt about that from the way their proposal was structured. And Amazon also, I'll be honest with you, said they thought that was one of the better ones. We had the price was also good. That was in line with what we were expecting. And the time to implement, Mission was able to get onto it within a few weeks of accepting the proposal. As I said, time is important to a startup that's trying to move quickly. And so it was the quality of the proposal, the recommendations that were received from Amazon, and the time to implement was Mission was ready to go as soon as we decided to pull the trigger.
And let's go through the process a little bit. So you got a proposal. Did Mission kind of walk you through, like, this is what the migration is going to look like? This is how we're going to go from A to B?
Yes, the proposal, as I recall, I didn't get a chance to pull it out again, but the proposal clearly spelled out the steps and phases in the project with deliverables and what we can expect at each phase. And the standing up of our cloud went according to that plan. And really, there was pretty much no hitch in all of that. It really was remarkably easy. I think I will give myself a little credit in that I think one of the things which all of our vendors that made wrote proposals for us appreciated was, and I'd recommend this to anyone in the same position, we were very careful to gather requirements and write a clear requirement specification, and not just say, yeah, we got to figure out how to do something on the cloud. Can you just do it for us? I'm sure it wouldn't have come out correctly. And it's true, we did have, our primary need was to sort of copy the cloud that we had, as far as the application, the primary application, copy how that works. But there are certainly differences between our cloud system and the one used by Indica Labs. So while that was a template, there were many differences. So our requirements very clearly spelled out what we needed. I mentioned the 2 environments and so on. So we clearly we tried to be very careful on making the requirements specific. And my experience in software engineering is start with requirements and then go back to the requirements and develop them, and then make sure they're really the requirements before you write anything.
Right.
Because you will end up doing it twice or 3 times if you didn't really clearly think through what you were going to try to do to begin with.
So in terms of through that, kind of process, obviously we laid out the methodology and showed you that roadmap, which is great. And like you said, went pretty smoothly. Before you jumped in, did you get a sense from us about like, what's my total cost going to be? What's my, what's my value? Am I going to get more performance? Did you get kind of a picture of your TCO?
So we did have some pretty ballpark numbers for what our TCO was going to be. And we knew that for us, as I said, to build out our own infrastructure, to hire some racks somewhere locally, we thought we'll at least break even and maybe save some money. And then, as we just said a few minutes ago, we'd have all this scalability that would be much, much more difficult to do with our own on-prem installation. So it was kind of a no-brainer, cost was a factor, of course, but also time is also a matter important.
I think maybe what let's talk about next is let's really dig into what the results were, right? So we've talked about that some, right? But overall, maybe give me capture how you feel the results of the migration.
Oh, it's been very successful. I really, users might complain about anything that primarily I'm serving our researchers and technicians in our services lab. I forgot to also mention that we also serve up a secure website. There is a component in the Indica Labs technology that allows one to have a web interface to view images in a browser that our customers can log into. So that is yet another aspect that would have been fairly complex for me to get working and make secure. But we find generally people are very satisfied with the web experience and also with the on-prem the experience they use every day. I forgot to also mention we use workspaces, so our actual end users launch a workspace and see a familiar Windows desktop, and they launch the different applications, the primary one being Halo. And we have had some times when there seems to be some performance problems. It could be our own network. It is a little bit hard to trace down these things. But I would say compared with trying to build our own on-prem structures and trying to get those optimized and running efficiently and continuously and backed up and everything, I would say it's probably much less grief for our end users using the cloud than an on-prem system would have been.
Well, fascinating. So ultimately, you mentioned earlier a little bit about kind of time was of the essence, right? And you looked at, on balance, cost versus time, and you also considered doing things yourself and taking advantage of the expertise of a partner. In your estimation, what do you think? How much time do you think you saved by allowing Mission to help you make that move?
Well, as I said, we had our cloud up and running in, I'd have to go back and look at my meeting notes, but I would say from the time we accepted the proposal to the time we had stood up, 80% of the infrastructure, it was maybe 2 months or a month. At that point, we were able to do some of our basic work and get going. I think if I had to go through pages and pages of Amazon documentation and try to understand everything, it would have easily been 3, 4. I have no idea. It would have taken twice or three times longer for me to build it. I'm sure I would have made a few mistakes along the way. We all do, and had to redo it or ended up with something that perhaps wasn't as secure or well designed.
We've touched on, I think, many of the benefits that you have now being in AWS. But if you could maybe give me your top couple of highlights, like in 2 or 3 measurable improvements that you've seen.
Well, as I said, we have that scalability. We have multiple users launching workspaces where they can run some analysis directly on cloud drives using Halo and other applications. They have the capability to do that from home easily with workspaces, which would have been a little more difficult with VPNs into an on-prem system. We have that scalability, which is very important. We started out with a couple of I think we started with a couple of 4 terabyte EC2 volumes for our first, and we could just increase their size. And now we have probably a dozen or more large EC2 volumes for all sorts of different groups in our company now. And then our S3 is, I should have had a number for you, but probably it's getting to a petabyte or more data. I don't know. We now have, as I said, a couple of years of data collection, and it's several terabytes a week or more is being uploaded. So I think that kind of scalability, flexibility to be able to access large amounts of data and do their work would have been much more difficult to do with an on-prem, a non-cloud solution.
Just with Mission. So I'm sure you've worked with many technology partners in the past. Just how does working with Mission compare to working with other technology partners?
Well, we've had a really good relationship. Mission has always had the expertise there to handle any problem. When it comes to Amazon, I think the Mission folks know exactly what they're talking about, and when they don't maybe know the answer to something, they can quickly get it from Amazon support. It's usually something incredibly esoteric. So knowledge and experience with taking advantage of Amazon and all of its, as you mentioned, the smorgasbord of technologies is several thousand or tens of thousands of technologies that one has access to, and understanding all of that Mission has brought a great deal of expertise to that problem, and we're very grateful for that. Knowledgeability, but also I found, as I mentioned, we work closely primarily with Jason, and he's very professional and very capable, as an example, and everyone else at Mission has been very efficient and worked easily with us. We've been very pleased with the interactions that we've had with the Mission staff and the speed at which problems are solved and issues are addressed.
All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. I definitely enjoyed having the conversation, and it's always good to hear that you're serving a customer well and effectively. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I am going to, as promised, share this little slide here about kind of the offer that we put together for attendees of this event today, which is effectively a free 1-hour migration consulting session with a Mission SA, like Scott here. So if you would like to attend one of these, please go to missioncloud.com/migrate. You can also reach us on our website there via email, info@missioncloud.com, or via phone, and we'll happily get you scheduled. But I want to thank again Mackenzie and Scott for joining us today. Thank you all for attending, and look forward to hearing from you and answering your questions and helping you on your cloud journey. Thank you so much.